Good Woche. I'm going to start off with a story, and as it's Motzei Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos Shmois, the story reads like this. The story has appeared in several places. This is with the most detail which I found. So one time, our Rebbe is sitting with Reb Shmuel Levitin in the presence of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Our Rebbe asked Reb Shmuel Levitin if he heard in Lubavitch back in the town of Lubavitch, did he hear things about the Tanya? Because the Rebbe says, I'm intending to publish a sefer of material about the Tanya, and so I'd like to have your input. So now this is actually those who have been following. There's just been published this 2-volume beautiful work on Tanya, which the Rebbe had kind of described this project 70 years ago. They wanted to print a Tanya, which should be similar to like this style of a Gemara, with the commentary and with sources. And that was finally published a couple of months ago, and many thousands of copies have been sold, highly subsidized also. So that's probably what the Rebbe was talking about. So this is going back, well, easy 70 years. And so the Rebbe says to Rav Shmuel Levitin, he's publishing a volume about the Tanya, and could you tell me some information? So Rav Shmuel says the following. There was a family called Klatskin. There were Rabbonim, they were in several places, he says in Lublin and others. So their father learned together with a friend or with a brother, in the yeshiva of the Chassam Sofer in Pressburg. One day they left the yeshiva in Pressburg and they came to Lubavitch, to the Tzemach Tzedek. And they wanted to hear Chassidus from the Rebbe. At that point, for whatever reason, the Rebbe wasn't saying Mamor Chassidus. One day there was a simcha in Lubavitch, and the Rebbe was there, that's a Tzedek, and he said a Maimer. For whatever reason, these Klatskin brothers weren't there, and so they missed the Maimer, and they were very upset. They went into the Rebbe and they complained, and they said that the fact that they had missed on hearing the Maimer. So the Tzemach Tzedek says to them, they should learn Tanya with Reb Hillel Paritcher. He was there apparently. So he said, go to Reb Hillel. These were great Talmidei Chachamim. He told learn some Tanya with Reb Hillel Paritcher. So they said to the Tzemach Tzedek, Reb Hillel is a klisheni, and klisheni ain't a mavashel. In other words, they want to hear Klirisha from the Rebbe himself. So the Rebbe answered, Rebbe Hillel is taka klisheni, aber it's yatziledes bei. It's got the scolding heat to it. And so yeah, that was the conversation. And then Rebbe Hillel indeed sat down and learned Tanya with them. And they learned the first Perek in Tanya about Tzadikim Bein Rishoyim. So Rebbe Hillel explained what is a Rebbe. And he says the following: Beinani is Gvul, Tzadik is Bli Gvul. What is a Rebbe is Bli Gvul B'teicha Gvul. That's the point which is sharing. And the Shmuel Levitin, when he told this story, so the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, shrugged his shoulders. However you learn pshat, the shrugging of the shoulders. But this was the word which he said, and I saw there's a biography of the Rebbe. I saw a biography where they bring this story, and they're thinking, what's this thing about Yad Tzeledes Bey? And the way they had written is that Yad Tzeledes Bey is cooks, even if it's a klisheni, which is not true la halacha. So that's not the pshat of the story. I discussed this a couple of years ago. Dovshin Pei Base. I have the when it was in the summer of Pei Base. We discussed this story, and the word is not talking about Hilchas Shabbos, but you have in Hilchas in Yeredeya, it comes up this inyan that a Yad Tzeledes Bey can cause possibly a certain degree of interaction, a kind of belia. And this is so interesting what Rabbi Hillel explains to them. They wanted to hear from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe sent them to Rabbi Hillel, and they were said he's not a clearician. So Rabbi Hillel, in his explanation of Tanya, he says the difference between apostate, Benini, sorry, and a tzaddik, and then what's a Rebbe, which I think is also kind of explaining. Yeah, you got clearician, and the Rebbe is bligvul b'techakvul. He's able to reach into a chassid, and that was their time. And the Rebbe is the clearician, is mavash, will penetrate. And he's saying he does he may not be able to do that, but there's still some kind of power. Okay, why am I bringing up this story now? Because just for this Shabbos was published a Sikha from Tov Shin Lamed, Lamed, what is it? Kolponim, the Sikha, which was published this week by Hanochas Balahak, is about, it's a Sikha for Chof Hei Tevis, Shabbos, and the Rebbe talks about it's in between Chof Dal Tevis, is the Alter Rebbe's Yortzeit, and Yud Shvat, which is the Friedrich Rebbe's Yortzeit. And he talks about the Alter Rebbe bringing Chassidus to in a way of Havana Vasoge, and the Friedrich Rebbe, his Hafotzes Mayonis Zohar Tvei, was the union of, he brought it to the broader population, which people didn't understand the original Yiddish or Hebrew, and he brought it, he saw that it should be translated into French, into German, and to English, and to Italian. And then the Rebbe celebrates the fact that just that week, that he had received the Tanya translated into Arabic, which, and he mentions that Tomim printed it. Was my late uncle, Leibol of Shalom. He had the Tanya translated into Arabic, and the Rebbe sees this very significant because he says the 70 nations of the world can be kind of identified under two groupings, under Esav and Yishmael. And the language of Esav is Russian, and the language of Yishmael is Arabic. And the fact that the Tanya is translated into Arabic, particular, he sees this as a way of a birur of Yishmael. The Rebbe shall say to be bekorev akalponim. So in that context, the Rebbe in that Sikha talks about translations. Really, he says that really it would have been better that they should learn in the Klirischen, because learning in another language is a Klisheni. Not Klirischen, sorry. He says learning in another language is not a Klirischen. However, the skashas to Rabsein and Nesienu and carrying out the shlichus, there's also the koyach to cook al derech inyan ha'iri. So, as he refers, akechol achiluki dinim shemotzina b'yeredeya about klin choshes, klimatches, ve'enkam mekem elaharich b'zeh. So what I'm seeing here is it's very similar that you're talking about Klirischen is mevashel, and the Friedrich and the Tzemach Tzedek says, okay, Reb Hillel is Yatzeledesbe. And here the Rebbe is saying the translation may not have the power of Klirischen, but it has the power of Irui. And I see he's referring to Yeridea rather than to Hilchos Shabbos. Yeah, that this is where the main discussion is. And the publisher adds a couple of footnotes, a couple of references rather, to Shach in Yeridea in Simen Sameches and in Simen Kufhei, and where the Shach writes here, you can see near on year's deity Poshet Nashas, the Klina Choishes is going to absorb through Irui. It brings a raya from the Gemara. It says in Gemara's Zochim, we're talking about kalim which are used for karbonos, whether echot shabishel boy, whether it was cooked in that keli, echot she'eiro letoichai reiteach, or if it was they poured into it boiling, I guess, gravy of the carbonas, ton mariko shtifo. There's a procedure of kashrin kalim which were used for carbonas, which I'm not going to go into, but this is where the Rebbe is referring to. He says it's discussed in Yeredeya that Irui is also able to penetrate. So this was just this week, and I wanted to share this idea that, yeah, the chassid is not the Klirischen, but if and here the Rebbe says, with the power of the iskashas to Rabsein Nesienu, then you can also have the power of levashel, because you are kind of coming with the vigor and the impact of the Klirischen. Right. Let's now go on to the list of questions. It's grown since Erev Shabbos, but so the first point on the list was about a chuppah. How do you calculate the 7 days of Sheva Brachas? In other words, when can you do the last Sheva Brachas? So here the way I put the question was, the chuppah was held at 2 p.m. on Monday. Is following Sunday evening still within, is it are the 7 days over or not? So can you make a Sheva Brachas with with a meal with saying Sheva Brachas at the end? So this is from, you can see it's as a Simon Samach base, and there are more spells out. Ve'elu Zayin Yomim. These 7 days start right after the first set of 7 brachas, which means under the chuppah. Under the chuppah you say Sheva Brachas, and that's the beginning of the series of 7 days. And so in this case, since the chuppah was at 2 p.m., so presumably by 2:30 the Sheva Brachas under the chuppah was said. That's still before Shkia. So Monday is the first of the Sheva of the 7 days. Therefore, Sunday night, which is already Monday Lalocha, you wouldn't be able to do Sheva Brachas. Someone else contacted me. This is why I looked it up. His wedding is going to be scheduled. The chuppah is going to be a quarter of an hour after the Shkia. So I responded to him, quarter of an hour after the Shkia, that's when they start. Then they're going to have the Hakofis, and then they're going to do the Kiddushin. And that's the Rebbe's letter. And then they're going to be Kiddushin, and then they're going to read the Ksubah. By the time they get to the Sheva Brachas, it's going to be well after Tzesa Kechovim, and therefore he's work out that will be the next day already without a question. So here it says, and then Panorama says it starts from the chuppah. In the Bar Heitev, in the Pischei Tshuva, he brings from Knesset Yechezkel. He's not so sure. He's thinking that if they have the meal right afterwards, then you'd count from the first meal or something. But Lepoil, we don't follow that. As he says, that we don't count from the meal, we count from the chuppah, and so that's how you work out your Sheva Brachas. Okay, let's go on to the next thing, and there is about, someone asked me, they have need to have someone to help them with cutting their nails, so manicure and pedicure, can they have them both on the same day? So this is written in Shulchan Aruch, and Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, and Siman Reish Samech, which talks about the preparation. Reish Samech, in the preparations for Shabbos, and he says that there are those who are particular not to cut the fingernails and the toenails on the same day because of chashash sakana. And the sources given to the Magid Meshorim. Magid Meshorim is written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, and he had a teacher, a malach who would come to him and reveal to him in Yonim, and he writes them down. In his dream, he would come very often and tell him this, and you did this, you didn't do this, you should do this, and also in Yonim of Torah. And he talks about the fact that you didn't cut the nails of your hands on the same day because you cut the nails of your toes or your legs on the same day. It's not appropriate to cut both of them on the same day. Do not muzzle the ox whilst it's in process of threshing. What's that got to do with cutting nails? So I'm suggesting it means that there's a certain chayas which Klippa is entitled to, so to speak. Besides Shoresh, we do Averis, Chas v'Sholom, so we're giving them extra Yenika. But otherwise, there's a set allocation for Klippa. And that's like the Shoyer, whilst he's working, is entitled to eat whilst he's threshing. To deprive the ox of his Yenika is wrong. And so to cut the nails of the hands and the feet on the same day, which the nails is B'tefra is a Yenika for Klippa, the Rosh of the Zohar B'tefra Achidon, and therefore it's considered overstepping the cutting away the chayes from Klippa. I'm just going on aside for a moment. It's interesting the Lashon of B'tefra Achidon, the Lashon of the Zohar, and that's in a ruchnistic sense, but it also begashmius is very common that people, if you're busy with stuff, you get the schmutz, you get the dirt, soil stuck underneath the nails. And there is a kind of relationship between cleanliness and tahara and purity, as we see in the Mishnah, the Bryce at the end of Soita. And so the Gashmius is a reflection of the Ruchnius. Right, let's move on. So a bocher was at a Fabrengen over Yudas Kislev was inspired to commit himself to memorize several prokim of Tanya by Yud Shvat. And as Yud Shvat is nearing closer, he realizes that's not going to be possible. So now the question is, what do you do with it, with the commitment? And they did not say Berlin, these a few Bochrim, they didn't say Berlin Eider. So a sympathetic Mashgiach reached out to me and asked me, what's the story? So here you have from the Sefer Kol Nidre, which I've mentioned several times in the past, and he has two paragraphs. Paragraph Ches says the following: if someone undertook to learn a specific inyan on a daily basis, and then he regrets making that commitment because he has other commitments, other learning commitments, and the other areas are more appealing to him, and this is finding it not so appealing. So he says he's allowed to be mataneder. Then he says, if a person made a promise to learn a vow to learn X amount of hours per day, some poskim say you can't be matir such a neder unless the Bezdin really see that it's impossible for him to keep up. Others say you can be matir such a neder. So just to explain there seems to be a little bit, they're not the same. The rulings are different. So the first ruling is he's learning this inyan, and he's saying, I can't learn this inyan, I want to learn a different inyan. It's not diminishing his limud Torah. It's just which area he's focusing. On this, he says, this area, that area, one can be mekel. The second example, the second question was, he wants to diminish the amount of time he's going to learn Torah. He made a commitment to learn Torah X amount of hours, and now he wants to learn less. So that is the whole reason why we have to ask a person for Hatash Nedarim. We have to ask, what is your vow about? Because sometimes the vow is something which we cannot be matir. And therefore he's saying, no, a person wants to have less hours or diminish his commitment to learning. It's not really something which is so easy to undo, unless the Bezdin sees that it's a genuine need, that he cannot cope with such a large commitment, then the Bezdin would be able to matir neder. Others are a bit more lenient. So that's the difference over here. So with these bochrim, so they're seeing that they are not coping because they have other commitments in their learning, and then that's so it's if they're not learning Tanya Balpeh, they're going to be learning other stuff. So it's not to diminish in learning Torah, it's rather than to focus on other areas, and therefore then one can be matir neder. I want to just share with you. I once got a question, a woman from France. She wanted to be matir neder for something. So I asked, what was the neder? Well, the neder was to keep Shabbos. But I said, why do you want to be matir neder? Because my husband is very upset about it. And so now becomes a question. She's asking for Torah Nedarim and to be matir neder, that she should be allowed to join him in Chilul Shabbos. Unfortunately, we could not accede to that request. So that's the importance of asking before being matir neder, that one doesn't have to be all three, but one of the three people who is going to be giving Hatash Nedarim has to be aware and has to be knowledgeable that that kind of neder can be absolved. Right. Here, the next thing is very interesting discovery for me. So here's the scenario is the following. There's someone who davens carefully, is very into his davening, and he sometimes will start Shmon Esrei, perhaps with a minyan. Probably he starts in ahead of them, and he sometimes stops to think, and By the time he's up to Mechaya Mesim, from the quiet Shemona Esrei, the Chazan is up to Mechaya Mesim, the Chazor Hashaz. So now he's asking, can he join in to say Kedusha? So he didn't. So now, so we're going to learn this siman, this halacha in Siman Kuftes about being a tandem chazan, being a chazan and saying quietly along with the chazan. So you have this. Where Moshe, it says in the Tosfos that Rabbeinu Tam, he would daven sometimes a bit slower than the minyan, and he waited by Shira Chadosha to answer Kedusha, and then he started his Shemona Esrei. So it looks like, unlike the minhag today, you have to wait for the Rabbonim, yeah? Yeah. As you know, the famous word, Al Shleisha Dvarim Ha'olam Oimed, yeah, Al Ha'emes V'Adinu Al Shalom. Yeah, you heard this before. Al Shleisha Dvarim Ha'olam Oimed. This is the end of it's a different Yerusah, it's the end of Perik Aleph, Perik Ovis. The Olam is standing and waiting for the Rov. Al Ha'emes, you should say Hashem Al-Kechem Emes. But Al Ha'Shalom is that you should say Esa Shalom. And Al Adin, there's what I'd ask a Shaila. Okay. Akoponim, so here we have in Siman Kuftes. So, if you have to start, for your not time pressure, you have to start Shemona Esrei, and you're starting together with the Chazan. When the Chazan reaches Nakdishach, or to Nekadesh, depending on the Nusach Ashkenaz, so you will say word for word with the Chazan. You'll say Nekadesh together, or Nekadishach together with the Chazan. Although a Yochid, as in standing on as your own, davening on your own, you would not say Kedusha inside your tefillah. But now that you are saying it together with a chazan, you no longer call the Yochid. As I said before, that's why I'm coining the phrase a tandem chazan. You're davening together with the chazan as if you are accompanying another quiet chazan. And therefore, you should also continue to say word for word, etc. Then it says the chol zeh, this procedure of davening as a tandem chazan is only where you are under pressure to daven to start davening now because shlichus gula l'tefillah, you're ready to shut gal yisrael, etc., or because the time is running tight. But if you're not pressed, then don't start together with the chazan and to say kedusha with him. Why not? Because lechatchila, it should be interactive. You're meant to hear the chazan prompting. He says nakdishoch or nekadesh, and then you will say kodesh kodesh. He will say lemosa meshabchim emrim, and you will say baruch. He will say kodesh lemer, and you'll say yimlich. That's the correct procedure. And since when you're doing it as a tandem chazan, you're going to have to say everything. Therefore, it's not advisable to take this route. That's what the Alter Rebbe explains. Which is interesting because according to Minhag Arizal, you say everything. You say also L'mos B'Shabchim Yemrim. You say also V'Divikot Shecha. And so therefore, if you follow the Minhag Arizal, apparently the Rebbe did so. So then this objection falls away. So you could l'chatchila start with the chazan. But just one piece of advice: sometimes the chazan is so fast that you won't be able to keep up with him. If you're one of those people, don't daven fast, and so it may be healthier just to wait by Shira Chadosha. Right, but let's come now. But this is all if you start off together with a chazan. But now, what happens if you didn't start with a chazan? So here we have from a sefer called Leket Yosher. Leket Yosher is a sefer which is written as a Talmud of Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin. Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin is the author of the Trumas Hadeshen, about 600 years ago, something like that, in Germany. And he writes the following. A Yochid was davening Shemona Esrei, and he thought he would finish his Shemona Esrei before the Chazan will start. But he just arrived at Mechaya HaMesim, and the Chazan has already started. So then he cannot wait. He's doing Mechaya HaMesim, and here's the Chazan starting Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Avosinu. So he says you shouldn't wait until Mechaya HaMesim and join in. Rather, just daven, continue where you're doing. And in other words, you'll miss out the opportunity to say Kedusha. So that seems to be saying that what this gentleman is asking would not be okay, because in other words, it seems to be that this heter to say kedusha together with the chazan is only as what I call the tandem chazan. But if you are not, because you started earlier, it seems to be not okay. Then we look here further. We have in the Mishnah Brura, in the Bir Halacha, and refers to the El Yorabba. Now, just to clarify, we have said this before. Rabbi Nissen Mangel told me that once the Rebbe corrected him, he referred to the Sefer as Eliyahu Rabba instead of the name is Elyo Rabba. And I think the reason is because Eliyahu Rabba is the Braisa, Tonadve Eliyahu, and it's Talve Eliyahu Rabba, and Tonadve Zuta, and there are people who have accustomed to learn it on every Motzei Shabbos. That's the Eliyahu Rabba. And then the Sefer of Elyo Rabba, V'Yod Shapira, which is a commentary on the Levush. So to distinguish between the two, it's referred to as Elyo Rabba rather than Elyo Rabba. Good. Al in the Mishnah Brura, the Be'aloch says that it's okay even Lechatchila, that which the Maramo is not so keen, and we saw the Alter Rebbe is not so keen Lechatchila, it's okay. Then he says, but if you started before the Chazan, and because of your kavona, your great kavona, prolonged kavana, or whatever reason, and then you happen to coincide with the chazan, or the other way around, that you started after the chazan. But the shliach tzibur took his time. Whatever it is, they say you didn't start together with the chazan, and it comes then you're now at the same time. So mashma minei, that's only b'diavad, not a lechatchila. So he says it is okay, but to b'diavad. Now here comes a very interesting thing. So then what we've seen here is it looks like only if you are a tandem chazan do you have license to say kedusha together with the chazan. Then the Shulchan Aruch says, what about if you are davening shachris and the chazan is davening musaf? And can you be a tandem chazan and you're davening shachris and he's davening musaf, and you're going to want to say kedusha together with him? So you're going to throw in a keser, I guess, or an aritzoch if you're davening Ashkenaz. So there are those who say it's kedusha shoynus, but the halacha is not so. Halacha is you can join in because it's considered the same kedusha. Then it goes on to say, but what happens if the chazan is on for a volat kedusha in Yetzer or in volat Tzion, yeah, and then everyone responds Kaddish, and in that's how they do it, yeah. So now, can you respond there? You're in the middle of Shemon Esrei. There, they are in the middle of a volat Tzion. Can you do that kedusha in the middle of your Shemon Esrei? So they say no, that's really not considered the same kedusha. Fine. So together with Musaf and Meshachris are compatible, but in the middle of your Shemon Esrei with Yotzer or the volat Tzion is not compatible. Fine. Now this is a bracket, as we know, the Alter Rebbe puts stuff in brackets. These are things which the Alter Rebbe is mechadash. From here you learn. Shehayochid keshemagia betfilosei nevir chasat hakodesh yochil lanos kodesh imatzibur afal pishu hu lo yomar lo shoma nekadesh v'lo nakdishach b'pi hashatz. He didn't hear the chazan's prompting, not nekadesh or nakdishach, and he can still say kodesh with the tzibur. Why? Because of all that Sin you said he can't because it's not Kedusha Shabbos, but there's no Nekadesh over there, and that was your only problem because it's not the same Kedusha. Well, if it's in Kedusha as in before Atar Kodesh, then he can join in. So I don't understand. I was very confused. Before you said that better if you're not pressed, better wait and before by Shira Chadosha. Lo yaschil mashatz, yeah, better wait. And here is saying you can say it together with the chazan. So it doesn't seem to be working the same thing. V'yesh loymar, the way I think, at least hashkafa rishono, hashkafa shniya is the following. There's two mahalchim here. One is to be a tandem chazan, and that was discussed earlier. And that doesn't seem to be so recommended. Here, he's not a tandem chazan. He's just going to say Kodesh Baruch and Yimlech. And that he says you can do middle of Shemona Esrei. In other words, in the right place, just before Ata Kodesh. So that you can do. So the answer to this gentleman who's Ma'idich B'Tfilah is that he can answer Kedusha, Kodesh, and Baruch and Yimlich. He can answer in the middle of Yisro and Esra, as we see over here in this Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. It's not the same as answering the whole Kedusha, which is the tandem Chazan, and the difference would be very significant in Nusach Ashkenaz. That if he is a tandem Chazan, so then he's going to say, "L'deva derga nagid god lecha nashay netzach netzachim tshos chanakdish v'shivcha chalakenu mipido yesh loyim shloilam ki kel mel god lekadosh ata." Yeah, that's only the Chazan says it. Yeah, am I right? I don't daven nusach as minyanim very often. In other words, the Chazan says ata kodesh different to the Yachid. If he's a tandem Chazan, he'll say the Chazan's bracha. So okay, so much for that. Let's go on. So someone asked me a question. Why do we say the bracha l'hisatev b'tzitzis and not to say l'hisatev b'talis? Because you're wrapping yourself with the talis. So I told him simply because you don't have a mitzvah to wrap yourself with a talis. The mitzvah is to wrap yourself with a talis which has got tzitzis. Or to have tzitzis on the talis which you wrap yourself with. And it triggered in my mind to the discussion about what is the nusach habrocha. Is it bat tzitzis or bet tzitzis? Bet tzitzis means the generic with tzitzis, the start of bet tzitzis. Bat tzitzis means with this, as if it were hey hayadir. So interestingly, in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, it says you should say bat tzitzis. But in the Siddur, we have the Nusach L'Hisatev B'Tzitzis. And the reference is given to the Birkei Yosef, who quotes here, Mikan mashma, that you should say Batzitzis with a Pasach. Right? Ki hadikduk eino smucha, or tzitzis, or in the Pasuk of a tzitzis roishi, like in the Pasuk in Yechezkel, it's smucha, but tzitzis roishi. So that seems to be to say batzitzis. Because of Maram di Lunzano. See, Maram Lunzano is a great medactic from about 400 years ago. And he writes the following. La'olam, you should say batzitzis with a shiva. Even in the time when we had tchelis. Because if you're going to say batzitzis, it would mean batzitzis, the tzitzis hayadua, which means the threads. But you don't wrap you don't wrap yourself with the threads. But you say when you say b'tzitzis, it means with a shavo, it means that there's a generic mitzvah. There's a mitzvah lisatif with a garment which has tzitzis. So lisatif bat tzitzis means to wrap yourself with these tzitzis. That's incorrect. Lisatif with the mitzvah of tzitzis, to put on a garment which has tzitzis, that is the mitzvah. So that's and it seems to be the Alter Rebbe followed this psak rather than what he wrote in the Shulchan Aruch, according to other passages, and say bat tzitzis. So someone's asking if you're davening in Nusach Ashkenaz Minyan, you're davening with the Chazan. Would I say Nekadesh or Nakdeshach? So in other words, if you are doing this tandem Chazan business, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how significant it is that you should dafka have to change from your nusach. There are those who say that always you have to say according to the nusach of the tzibur, but the Poil Rav Olam are not knowing it that way. They just do their own nusach, they're doing it quietly. It's no one else's business. Yeah. Right, let's move on to the next question. So a child, this is a child, a shlucha somewhere in Europe is organizing a challah bake, which has become a minig nofitz, yashonim achronos, make challah bakes, and she's asking, can a child, and they're giving every woman, they're giving a shir challah, whatever the shir is, give a minimum that each woman could make with the brocha. Good. But now she's asking, can she give a girl under bas mitzvah also to join in? small community, and it's a very beautiful thing that they're able to make such a thing. A chinuch. I don't know whether they even have a Jewish school in the community. So we have a Mishnah. I said on the spur of the moment, I said that no, I don't think it's okay. And indeed, this is not in Hilchas Chala. I couldn't find it in Hilchas Chala. This is in Hilchas Truma. In Siman Shin Lamed Aleph Yeridea. It's a long siman. It's got about 120, 150 seifim, probably one of the longest simonim in Shulchan Aruch. But it has the following. There's the Lashon of a Mishnah. Hamisha im Tormu. There are 5 categories who, if they took Truma, the Truma is not valid. Chayrish, short of a cotton, a person is a deaf mute, imbecile, a child, nochri, and then if it's not your property, without permission. So it's clear that a child's truma is not binding, it's not effective. And so then we have, however, interesting, comes the 3 sifim later, says, but if a child is up to the age where nedorim are taken seriously, because we have in the Torah the concept of muflus samuch leish, the year before bar mitzvah, the year before bas mitzvah, and there's the concept of nedoro of nivdokim, that if they are mature enough that they make a commitment, it's a serious commitment. So then their vows are recognized. So since chala is happens through declaration, so if they are capable of making a neder, they are capable of being mafresh chala. It's very interesting, which was news to me. So that's what you see here in the Shach. He says, even if we're Truma Shel Torah, since they have a power of Hekdesh or Neder, as discussed in Hilchos Nedorim Siman Reish Lamed Gimel, and therefore, also if they take Chala, the Chala is valid. Okay. So now my next question to make up, now everyone was asking what's question number 7. So here's question number 7 came in a little bit later. On Friday, I'm sitting in the Beis Hairoah, and a woman asks, what's the guidelines regarding doing melacha on Motzei Shabbos? So we're not talking about before Havdalah. We're talking about after Havdalah, generally on Motzei Shabbos. So like you have chumras of Noshim not to do melacha whilst the candles are burning on the Chanukah and Rosh Chodesh, also the minig of women to refrain from melacha. So we have here, this is from the Piskei Teshuvos in Siman Shin. In many holy communities, there is an old tradition of the women not to engage in heavy-duty malacha, relatively speaking, as in sewing or weaving or art, possibly, or other things which require significant malacha, the whole of Motzei Shabbos, even after Malav Malka. And some would avoid malachas, which are to earn money, of dafka malacha, but not trade, which is interesting, a very interesting distinction, because if you look in the Hamish News Sheet over here, you'll see so many outlets open on Motzei Shabbos in the winter. So that's, well, they've got some support over here. I don't know how in the spirit of Shabbos it is, but they says it is okay. Whereas when it comes to, I responded to the woman afterwards. I said it's that if it's just to sew on a button, that's okay. But if it's like a whole project of sewing or something, there are those who have that minig not to do so on Motzei Shabbos. And indeed, the source we have here is back to the Mogen Avraham in the previous Siman Reish Tzadik Tes. Noshim who don't do Melacha on Motzei Shabbos, Einoi Minag. It's only a minig until after the tzibur have finished Shmona Esrei. However, Nog, despite what the Torah says, Nog, says the Magen Avraham in the name of Avud Arham, Nog unoshim leishleilasis melacha kol Motzei Shabbos. So we do have such a minhag. It does exist, and so if that's the minhag of that community or your community, so you keep to that. What is Lubavitch minhag? Don't answer. I don't know the answer because I haven't done a survey around the Lubavitch community whether they do sewing on Motzei Shabbos. I remember such a thing I'm not doing, yeah, but I don't know whether it's to say it's Lubavitch minhag. What they do say is that, as far as doing laundry, nowadays it's not an issue because laundry is not like standing by the and scrubbing with a board or something. It's just popping it into a machine and pressing a couple of buttons. For me, if I would do that, it would be very hard work because I don't know how to do it. But for women, for them, it's not considered melecha kaveda. Right, let's move on. So now a question which I, no one asked me, but I came across this a very interesting thing, and I wanted to share it with you. The Gabe, as before he starts calling up the Kohen, so on Shabbos is on the weekday it's so why is there the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov on the one side, whereas V'yazav Yogim Yeshia, and in the weekdays it's V'sigol V'sirah. So what you have on the screen is a sefer called the Divrei Koheles, written by someone called Reb Shlomo Geiger, who lived, I believe, in Frankfurt. And his mission, his whole sefer, he calls it Divrei Koheles because Koheles is another name of Shlomo. His mission is to explain and give sources for the Minhag Frankfurt, which sometimes are different to other minhagim. And so, meanwhile, there's lots of very interesting insights here. And he says, the Levush says on Shabbos, on weekdays that we don't have the paragraph Ava al Hakoil, because people have to get to work, and the Chazan starts Tegolem. And by the way, there's a ha'or of the Rebbe that is it V'sigole or V'sira or is it Tigole V'sira? It's interesting here it's Tigole, and the Rebbe says to check up the Yaakov Emden Siddur Ve'ene Tachas Yodi. Doesn't have the Yaakov Emden Siddur handy. In my Siddur, I did have access to the Yaakov Emden Siddur. It's V'sigole, which is an interesting question. Why is it starting off V'sigole? Someone wrote to me on Friday, actually. It's understood that this is a continuation of Harachamim. Or not, no, what's the last third paragraph? I call upon him. It's a continuation of the paragraph which was said just before. At any rate, so the Divrei Koheles says that the Levush does not give a reason why in Shabbos it's V'yazer instead of a Segole. Oh, it's with a vav, yeah. So which is said a mincha and other times when we read the Torah. So he says the following: on Shabbos and Yom Tov morning, there's going to be, after Kriyas Torah, there's going to be Maftir and Haftarah. And there we're going to say Samchenu, gladden our hearts with the Geula. And therefore, they don't need to say V'segola V'seroi Machus Aleinu, to ask for Bias Moshiach. They don't need to say it before Kriyas Torah, because it's going to be said at the end of Kriyas Torah by Samchenu, in Birchas Haftarah. But on the weekdays, when you have a Kriyas Torah without Haftarah afterwards, so then you have the Bakosha for the Geula V'segola V'seroi Machus Aleinu B'zman Korif. Then you can ask the Shaila, if that's the case, what about at Mincha on a fast day, where you do have a Haftarah, and you do have the Samchenu Yonov Avdecha. So you're going to have that. You have 3 brachas instead of 4, but you're going to have the bracha of Samchenu is going to be said. So he gives 2 very good reasons. One is, it would look a bit odd that on the fast day, we're going to start off, it's a fast day, and everyone's hungry and thinking it's a fast day, and then they're going to say, well, Yazav Yogim Yeshia sounds Yom Tovdik. So that seems to be out of character. Secondly, he said you only want to say it once, but on Tanis it's okay to say it twice. It's okay to ask on Tanis to ask for Mashiach twice. That's his second reason. Okay. Let's now move on. I have another couple of points. I've got 4 feedbacks. And actually I feel very privileged that I have people, Talmidei Chachamim, listening and sending in various points of feedback. So the first thing we had a discussion about night tzitzis. And I quoted last week from the Piskei Teshuvos, and I had with Tzemach Tzedek, that about the tzitzis for night should not be exclusively used for the night, because then it's going to be a beged laila, it's potem not tzitzis. That's the lashon of Tzemach Tzedek we had on the screen last week. Right. So now here, this is Piskei Teshuvos, and I quoted from the Piskei Teshuvos for last week, and the others are not so worried about it. Here he says another thing. What happens if someone's Tal's cotton tore or got dirty? Can he take his night tzitzis and use it for the day? So he says it's a question because Tasav Lemina Osu. Now, let's read this carefully. Im yesh bechasoya, the high b'shas hatolos hatzitzis boy yia kavanose sheyia b'ksus laila. It's really not a worry. I can assure you that 99.9 people who have a night tzitzis, it's their old daytime tzitzis. But if you are the 0.1% that you lechatchila bought a garment for night tzitzis and you put in tzitzis yourself, which is today also a rarity, you put in the tzitzis yourself for the kavona as for night tzitzis. That's potam tzitzis. That beged which you are designated for night is potam tzitzis. So you put in tzitzis for something which is not chayv tzitzis. Now, because your other tzitzis is torn, and now you got to use it, but it's not a kosher tzitzis. That's the point which is being said over here. But if you have regular nacht tzitzis, which were your old day tzitzis, and they were made l'shem mitzvah tzitzis, so then, okay, but then that's not a problem of tasav. Also, you can use it for temporary. Since it's Motzei Shabbos, I may have told the story before, but I'm going to tell you the story again. It's a long time since I may have told the story. There was in Ukraine an area called Galicia, perhaps, and you had a town called Lvov. There is a town called Lvov, Lemberg, and the town Belz is in that region. And there's a third city, which I don't remember now the name. And what happened was that the Tzvi Hirsch Chayes, Maratz Chayes, became the official government rov of Lvov and of the whole region, which meant that the Belzer Rov was under his jurisdiction. Maratz Chayes was a brilliant man, but he looks like he also was very knowledgeable in other fields of knowledge. And so in Belz, he wasn't really applauded. And it looks like once the Belzer Rov said something about him being a shegetz or something. And so now the Belzer Rov was now called to court for contempt of a government official. Since the Rav Chayes is a government rov, and he called him a shegetz, so he was brought to court. So there's this Ukrainian Goyish judge, and this why did you call him whatever you called him? So he says, explain. He says, well, he doesn't wear big talis cotton. He wears only small tzitzis. So Rav Chayes says to the judge, Your Honor, there's no duty to wear tzitzis altogether, and small ones is also good. The Ukrainian judge doesn't know what to do. He whispers to one of his attendants, I come back half an hour, and case is dismissed. And okay, so Belzer Rov goes back to where he goes, and then a little while later, Maratz Chayes is at some kind of function, and there's also there the author of the Sefer called Yeshuas Yaakov, who lived also in that region. And they're chatting. He said, I had a very strange story. Just last week, let's say whatever the day was, the day of the court case, but I didn't. I was just saying, I got up in the morning. Didn't wear tzitzis at night, as I mentioned last week. Some people don't wear tzitzis at night. I got up in the morning and I was looking for my talis cotton, and my regular one I couldn't find. I wear a small one. Comes Seres Metshuva, I wear a big one, but I couldn't find my small one. Look at all over. All right, so I just took my Seres Metshuva supersized one and put that one on, and I put it on my kapot, and I go on the way to shul. I'll get stopped by two gendarmes, two policemen, and they excuse me, and they open up my kapota, and they thank you, have a nice day. So they realized that Min HaShamayim, they had led the Yeshuas Yaakov that day he happened to be wearing. So because Maratz Chayes had said, the judge had said, go and check this other rabbi, which kind of tzitzis is wearing. So they came to the conclusion, don't start up with these Chassidish Rebbes. That was the conclusion. Okay, let's move on. So talking about that was about the night tzitzis, yeah? Then about the dog. Mentioned about, came up in the previous Shia was talking about owning a dog. So someone came, not last week, it was a few weeks ago, we talked about it. So this is from a contemporary sefer called Artze Besomim, contemporary, lives in Milwaukee. And he says, I'm really not very happy, Bichlal, about answering shilas about people even owning dogs. It's not a thing from a yid to be having a dog. And he gives us a reference to the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. And it talks there about King Koresh. And it says, Hashegel nitzov li minoi, that the Shegel was sitting next to him. And there's a whole discussion in the Gemara whether the Shegel means his wife, or Shegel refers to a dog. Like the dog was sitting next to him. And there's a whole discussion back and forth. And he says that the Ummos, they are drawn to the Klavte, because that's their proclivity, so to speak. They've got a chibur with a Klavte, and this is a chitzonius, and that's a goyisha thing. And so he's saying that this whole idea of, which I'm addressing this again, because it's unfortunately becoming more common. And I'll tell you another story. Rav Moshe Herzson alav Shalom went into Yechidus about the opening of the yeshiva in Morristown, and the Rebbe said the following: some Talmidim, whatever the environment is, they will succeed in their learning, but they are a minority. There are some Talmidim, in whichever environment you provide, they won't succeed in their learning. They are also a minority. But the majority is that if there is a conducive environment, they will succeed in their learning. And that should be your focus. I'm not going to dissuade those who have dogs already to go and give them away. But those who are on the borderline thinking, yes, no, is it right, is it wrong, should know that it's not a Yiddish thing. So this is what he's bringing here. It's a goyish proclivity to klovim, but it's not a thing for a Hamish Yid. Now, while the Hashgocha process last night, I was looking for something else, and meanwhile I came across this in the Rishimis. And here's the difference between when it talks about animals going on their hoofs. So it says the following: a chosul. So the Rebbe, Rashi mentions three animals: chosul, kelev, and doiv. A cat, a dog, and a bear. So the Rebbe, I'm not going to go through the whole Reshima, but he says a cat its moichin is not kideboy. It's lacking in moichin. It does not have doesn't recognize its master. Whereas in Midas, the cat is actually refined. And we have this idea, it says in the Gemara, that if Torah hadn't been given, Chas v'sholom, the Rebbe Rashab added, we would learn tznius from a cat. The cat, in its way, has got a certain tznius to it. The dog is the opposite. The dog is actually, in moichin, he is okay. And his makir is koinai. And it says also that the dog is a wise creature. But the dog is kuloi leiv, kelev, kuloi leiv, and it's possessed by its own heart, and it uses its wisdom, its slyness, for getting its food, etc. But it's asponim and it's shimesh b'teva. So just since we're talking about dogs, I saw this last night. The difference between cats and dogs, that the cat has got is a mile in midas and chasaron in seichel, and the dog has got a mile in seichel and a chasaron in midas. Neither of them, I guess, are a wonderful role model for Yiddish kind. Okay, then we have. I mentioned, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or it was last week. We had this discussion that a Balkoya said to me that, having heard that there's the Svara that the Balkoya is the bracha of the oil of the Torah is really the bracha of the Balkoya, says, okay, then why shouldn't be saying Baruch Hu Baruch Shemoi? which I think I said it was a good idea, and I would like to backtrack on that a little bit. And someone sent me the following. Someone from Montreal, he listens to the Shiurim regularly, and so he shared with me, this is from the Sefer Mate Ephraim. Now, the Mate Ephraim is published basically in two editions, with two types of commentary. One is Elef Lamate, Elef Hamogin, and one is from Eichenstein. This is the other one. So I'm just telling you because if you look at the other one, you won't find this comment. This is a ha'ora to a commentary on the Mati Ephraim, and this is in Hilchas, the end of Hilchas Yom Kippur, Tofrish Chav Beis. So he writes the following. Now, as you are familiar, there's a concept of having 100 brachas a day. To get your Mea brachas. And especially on the fast day, you're a bit short of your Mea brachas. And therefore, you listen to Chazos Hashatz and this and that, and then have Kriyas Torah and Haftorah. Somehow, I think it's Simon Menvov, it goes through how you manage to make up your quota of 100 brachas. So he was asked, I don't even know who it is. It's a note. I don't know who wrote this note. I was asked, should I answer Bochu Voch Shemoi in the brachas which I hear from the Chazan, if I want to have those brachas to make up my Mea brachas? And after thinking about it, I think it's okay to answer Amen. So answer Bochu Voch Shemoi, sorry. Because even when you want to be Yoitzer, as in Shrefer and Megillah, as I mentioned last week, that many Gedolim hold that you can answer Bochu Voch Shemoi. I think I mentioned the Sfardim are Paskin that way. And so, if you did answer Baruch Shemai, I mentioned last week, the Alter Rebbe says Mesupik Ulai. It's a hefsek between Shem and Malchus, even though others disagree. The Kol can be nidoin down. It's not a hefsek, and indeed that's the minig on Rosh Hashanah, Kippur, etc. To answer Baruch Shemai. Well, people answer after Birchas Hashachar. In the shuls they say brachas, and every Shabbos Yom Tov, even though you want to use those brachas to make up your quota of Mea brachas. Now, I apologize, I did not check this in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch and Siman Memvov, where he says you shouldn't answer Bochu Voch Shemai. So this might be not correct according to the Alter Rebbe. But meanwhile, I'm sharing that with you, what I had so far. Okay, we have, I think this is the last item on our list. Yeah. So if you remember last week, I'm not going to go through the whole pilpul, but we had a whole thing about a ha'ora of the Rebbe about tzedakah at night and giving tzedakah before Ma'ariv. And I quoted you from the Sefer B'chadrei Serosecho, which is the correspondence, should we call it, of Reb Leibel Gron alav shalom with the Rebbe, and how he asked the Rebbe about when the Rebbe gave a source for giving tzedakah, possibly it should be before Ma'ariv, and Rabbi Grona gave a reference to Shulchan Aruch Yeridea, and the Rebbe seems to have dismissed it. And I wasn't happy with the way the authors, the editors had presented the discussion. And I think I mentioned last week, my hunch is that this reference to Yeridea wasn't in the original letter. So they should geholfen that we have archivists, and someone dug up from his archive that indeed you can see the letter of the Rebbe, and it's now printed in Chelek Koptes, letter number 11,221. Yeah, amazing. But anyway, this letter, as I mentioned last week, 50th of El Tov Shlamid Dalet, and you can see here the Rebbe gives a reference to from the Shulchan Aruch and Merachaim Tzadik Beis is mashma that you should be giving be Kainot Tefillah. So it should be also before Ma'ariv. V'zil boso time ani b'tzedek echzeh ponecha. Well, the Kosovo came before Chaim that according to the Arizal, one wouldn't give tzedakah deliberately before Ma'ariv. Now, but then the printed letter, as it is in Likutei Sichos, is or Egamkin Shulchan Aruch Yeridea. So you can see what's happened over here. That at first the Rebbe did not have that reference to Yeridea. Rabbi Groner came along and gave this reference to the Rebbe. Initially, the Rebbe said they seem to be a bit contradictory, because here in Erchaim it says Kodim Tefillah, and in Yeridea it says Kodim Kol Tefillah. And yet it looks like afterwards the Rebbe said, okay, we should put it in, or Re'eh. I'm sure there's room for further weighing up to understand what the order of the Rebbe is. But the idea that the Rebbe would sometimes take a ha'ora, if someone had written in, and then it would be incorporated in the later edition. That was very common. And in my time in 770, I was living in Rebbe's Damas, so it was very often that 2 weeks later or something, in the back of the Kutasichas would be Ashmota, another reference, and it was very often that someone had written into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe then later gave I told them to incorporate it. Just but did you have over that they had there once a reference on the posuk on the term Leishokim Pamayim Sorah, and they had a reference to some medrash or some brayse, and somehow I knew that was a posuk in Amos, so I wrote in to the Mareches. It's a posuk in Amos. So 2 weeks later there was Hashmota. That her reference in the Kotasichas should be almost this and this. For a that medrash ways what. So it's okay. The Rebbe sometimes would kind of take in these recommendations and incorporate them in the published edition. That's what I have for you to share with you tonight. And I just want to say that next Motzei Shabbos, I hope to be in the other side of the pond. And therefore, I hope to be able to record a shir and give you the entertainment from Motzei Shabbos, but not live, but through a recording. Wish you all a good tavoch, and should be b'suras teves, shuas v'nechomes, and Yo Hanovi, Vasas and the Geula, Shlema, Shias Ekeinu, Mehevi Mein Mamash.
Amen.
Good work.
Oh, come up now.